The Cleveland Browns just made a move that could reshape their entire future, and it's happening in the trenches. A major offensive line rebuild, a looming quarterback battle between Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson, and one new lineman stepping into massive expectations. But the real story might be bigger than anyone expected. For the Cleveland Browns, the message from the front office this offseason has been unmistakably clear. The offensive line must be fixed, no matter the cost. After years of being considered one of the team's biggest strengths, the unit suddenly became one of its most concerning weaknesses. Injuries piled up, consistency disappeared, and what was once a reliable foundation started showing serious cracks. Not long ago, Cleveland's offensive line was viewed as one of the most stable groups in the NFL. Anchored by veteran leadership and strong chemistry, the unit gave the offense a level of protection that allowed the team to compete at a high level. But in the NFL, stability can disappear quickly. Injuries to key players forced constant lineup changes, and those adjustments began to affect communication, timing, and overall performance. Offensive line play is built on trust. Every player must understand exactly how the others will react to defensive pressure. When that rhythm breaks down, even talented players can struggle. Cleveland experienced that reality firsthand as the season unfolded. Protection issues began appearing more frequently, the run game lost some of its rhythm, and the offense as a whole struggled to maintain consistency. That's when the organization decided something had to change. Instead of making small adjustments, Cleveland chose a much more aggressive approach. The team began bringing in new talent, looking for players who could help reshape the identity of the offensive line. One of the most notable additions was Zion Johnson, a former first-round pick who arrived with both experience and something to prove. Johnson himself acknowledged how serious the team is about rebuilding the line. During his early conversations with the media, he described the Browns' leadership as hellbent on improving the offensive line and strengthening the roster as a whole. That choice of words wasn't accidental. It reflected the urgency Cleveland feels about correcting the problems that emerged last season. But rebuilding a line is never as simple as adding a few new names to the roster. Chemistry among offensive linemen takes time to develop. Every snap requires coordination, communication, and precise timing. Players must understand each other's tendencies, anticipate defensive movements, and react together as a single unit. Without that level of synchronization, even a talented group can struggle to perform consistently. That's why the Browns' strategy isn't just about talent, it's about building cohesion. New additions will have to learn how to work together quickly if the team wants to regain the stability it once had up front. And Cleveland knows exactly what's at stake. Because with a potential quarterback battle involving Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson looming over the offseason, the offensive line will be responsible for protecting whoever ends up leading the offense. But that pressure also means the new unit has a chance to redefine the team's identity. And that's where the story starts getting even more interesting. Every rebuild has a difficult moment where the future collides with the past. For the Cleveland Browns, that moment revolves around one name that has defined the offensive line for nearly a decade: Joel Bitonio. For years, Bitonio has been more than just a starter. He has been the standard. A multiple-time Pro Bowler and one of the most respected guards in football, his consistency helped shape Cleveland's identity in the trenches. Week after week, season after season, he represented reliability in a position group that depends heavily on trust and experience. When younger linemen across the league talk about elite guards, Bitonio's name almost always appears near the top of the list. But in the NFL, time eventually catches up with everyone. Recently, conversations have started circulating about Bitonio's long-term future. While nothing has been officially confirmed, some reports and speculation suggest that retirement could be approaching. If that happens, Cleveland wouldn't just be losing a veteran player, they would be losing one of the most important leaders the franchise has had in years. That's where the pressure quietly begins to build. Because when a player of Bitonio's stature steps away, someone else has to step into that role. And stepping into that position doesn't just mean taking over the job on the depth chart. It means replacing a presence in the locker room, a mentor for younger players, and a voice that teammates have trusted for years. That's a massive responsibility. Interestingly, new Browns lineman Zion Johnson didn't shy away from acknowledging that reality. When asked about Bitonio, Johnson spoke with clear respect. He described the veteran guard as someone who has played at an extremely high level for years and admitted that many young offensive linemen view Bitonio as the type of player they aspire to become. That kind of praise says a lot about how widely respected Bitonio is throughout the league. At the same time, Johnson also made something else clear. While he respects the legacy that came before him, he also believes in his own ability to help the team succeed. That confidence matters. Any player stepping into a role previously held by a franchise icon needs to have that mindset. Still, the situation creates a fascinating dynamic for Cleveland. If Bitonio does decide to return, the Browns would immediately regain one of the league's most dependable guards. His presence could stabilize the line and provide invaluable leadership for the newer players entering the system. But if he doesn't return, Cleveland's rebuild suddenly becomes even more significant. Because replacing a legend is never simple. And the player who takes that spot won't just be filling a position. He'll be trying to live up to a standard that has defined the Browns' offensive line for nearly a decade. And that's exactly where the next chapter of this rebuild begins. Sometimes in the NFL, a change of scenery can completely reshape a player's career. And for Zion Johnson, arriving at the Cleveland Browns may represent exactly that kind of turning point. Johnson entered the league with enormous expectations. Selected in the first round by the Los Angeles Chargers, he was viewed as one of the most technically polished offensive line prospects in his class. Coaches praised his intelligence, his discipline in pass protection, and his ability to adapt quickly to different blocking schemes. For a young lineman entering the NFL, those traits made him highly valuable. Early in his career, Johnson showed flashes of the player scouts believed he could become. He demonstrated versatility, moving between guard positions when needed and handling the kind of responsibility that usually takes young linemen several seasons to master. In a league where offensive line injuries happen constantly, that flexibility made him an important piece of the Chargers roster. But as seasons passed, the situation became more complicated. Reports and analyst discussions occasionally raised questions about Johnson's pass protection consistency. Offensive linemen are often judged harshly because their mistakes are highly visible. One missed assignment or one quick pressure allowed can become the focus of an entire game's analysis. Some critics argued that Johnson still had areas of his game that needed refinement, particularly against elite interior pass rushers. Then came a moment that quietly shifted the conversation. The Chargers declined Johnson's fifth-year option. In the NFL, that decision doesn't always mean a team has given up on a player, but it often signals uncertainty about long-term plans. Around the league, the move sparked speculation about Johnson's future and whether he would eventually find a better opportunity elsewhere. Johnson, however, didn't publicly show frustration with the situation. Instead, he responded in a way that revealed a lot about his mindset as a professional athlete. When asked about the decision, he calmly explained that he focuses on what he can control: his preparation, his performance, and the work he puts into improving each season. That mentality may be exactly what Cleveland was looking for. Because the Browns aren't just bringing Johnson in as another depth piece, they're bringing him in as part of a larger effort to rebuild the identity of their offensive line. A player with first-round talent, multiple seasons of starting experience, and a strong reputation for durability fits perfectly into that plan. For Johnson, the move to Cleveland offers something equally valuable: opportunity. Opportunity to reset the narrative surrounding his career. Opportunity to prove that his development is still trending upward. And opportunity to show that, in the right system and alongside the right teammates, he can become the reliable cornerstone offensive lineman many believed he would be when he first entered the league. But Johnson's fresh start also comes with pressure. Because Cleveland's offensive line rebuild isn't happening in isolation. It's happening while the team prepares for one of the most closely watched quarterback situations in the league, and that reality is about to put the Browns' new offensive line under an even brighter spotlight. Rebuilding an offensive line in the NFL is one of the most difficult tasks a team can attempt. It's not like replacing a single skill player where one athlete can instantly change a game. Offensive line success depends on 5 players operating almost like a single machine. And right now, the Cleveland Browns are trying to rebuild that machine almost from scratch. After injuries, inconsistency, and declining production in recent seasons, Cleveland's front office decided that small adjustments wouldn't be enough. Instead, the team began making multiple moves designed to reshape the entire structure of the line. The addition of players like Zion Johnson signaled that the organization wanted versatility, durability, and players who could adapt quickly. But Johnson wasn't the only change. Across the unit, Cleveland started adding experienced players who could bring stability to a group that had struggled to stay healthy. Offensive linemen such as Elgton Jenkins and Titus Howard were discussed as potential pieces who could help reinforce the line's structure. Each of them brings a different skill set, but the common theme is flexibility. In today's NFL, linemen who can move between positions have become incredibly valuable. That flexibility is exactly what Cleveland appears to be targeting. In Johnson's own words, offensive linemen often train to move in both directions, preparing to play on either side of the line if necessary. That kind of preparation becomes crucial when a team is trying to build chemistry quickly. Instead of relying on rigid positions, the Browns seem focused on building a group that can adjust to whatever situation arises during a long NFL season. Still, talent alone doesn't guarantee success. The biggest challenge for Cleveland will be developing what offensive linemen call synergy. It's the invisible connection that forms when players spend enough time working together that they instinctively understand each other's movements. Double-team blocks, pass protection handoffs, and run-blocking schemes all depend on that level of communication. Johnson has already emphasized how important that process will be. According to him, building chemistry requires time on the practice field, time in the weight room, and constant communication. Offensive lines that succeed aren't just talented, they are coordinated. And Cleveland knows they must build that coordination quickly. Because the pressure on this group is about to increase dramatically, the Browns aren't simply rebuilding their offensive line during a quiet season. They're doing it while facing one of the most unpredictable quarterback situations in the league. With Shedeur Sanders and Deshaun Watson potentially competing for control of the offense, the responsibility placed on the offensive line will be enormous. Whoever ends up under center will depend heavily on the protection in front of them. And that means Cleveland's rebuilt offensive line won't just be judged on improvement. It will be judged on whether it can hold together when the spotlight is at its brightest. While the Cleveland Browns have been busy rebuilding their offensive line, another storyline has been quietly gaining momentum behind the scenes, and this one could shape the future of the entire franchise. The quarterback situation. For years, the Browns believed they had solved that problem when they committed to Deshaun Watson as the centerpiece of their offense. The organization invested heavily in him, both financially and strategically, expecting him to become the long-term leader of the team. But the reality since then has been complicated. Injuries, inconsistent performances, and constant debate from analysts have created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Some fans still believe Watson can return to elite form if the right system and protection are built around him. Others have started wondering whether Cleveland might eventually look toward a different future. And that's where the name Shedeur Sanders begins to appear more frequently in conversations. Sanders has quickly become one of the most talked about young quarterbacks connected to Cleveland's future, known for his confidence, accuracy, and ability to stay composed under pressure. He represents a completely different timeline for the franchise. Younger, highly marketable, and surrounded by growing hype, Sanders has attracted enormous attention from fans and media alike. Some analysts believe Cleveland could eventually view him as a long-term solution if the opportunity arises. Others argue that the team may simply be exploring every possible option at the position while evaluating how the roster develops. At this stage, nothing has been officially decided. But speculation alone has been enough to create one of the most intriguing storylines around the Browns heading into the upcoming season. Anytime a team appears to have two potential starting quarterbacks, questions naturally follow. Who fits the offense better? Who gives the team the best chance to win right now? And who represents the future of the franchise? Interestingly, Zion Johnson handled the topic with the kind of professionalism teams value in offensive linemen. When asked about the situation, he didn't choose sides or speculate about who might start. Instead, he made the offensive line's role very clear. Their job is simple: protect whoever is under center. Whether that quarterback turns out to be Watson, Sanders, or someone else entirely, the offensive line must create the conditions for success. Clean pockets, strong run blocking, reliable communication. Without those elements, even the most talented quarterbacks can struggle. And that's why Cleveland's offensive line rebuild suddenly feels even more important. Because when a quarterback battle begins to form, every snap becomes more meaningful. Every protection breakdown gets analyzed. Every successful drive builds momentum. In other words, the performance of the offensive line could quietly influence the outcome of Cleveland's biggest decision. And that means the Browns' rebuild in the trenches might end up deciding far more than just the run game. Sometimes, it only takes one moment to change the entire conversation around a player. For weeks, debates had been circling around the future of the Cleveland Browns offense. Analysts were questioning the direction of the roster. Fans were arguing about the quarterback situation. And inside that noise, one name kept resurfacing in discussions about potential excitement around the team: Shedeur Sanders. But the real buzz didn't come from speculation alone. It came from a single play that quickly started making the rounds among fans and insiders. During a recent practice sequence and off-season footage circulating online, Sanders reportedly delivered a throw that immediately grabbed attention. The play wasn't just a routine completion. It was the type of deep, confident pass that quarterbacks are judged by, a perfectly timed throw placed exactly where only the receiver could reach it. The ball traveled downfield with velocity and precision, dropping into the receiver's hands while defenders struggled to react. It was the kind of play that instantly sparks conversation. Fans began sharing the clip across social media, debating whether Cleveland might have something special developing. And even players inside the organization started noticing. Among those paying attention was offensive lineman Zion Johnson. Known for his calm and disciplined approach to the game, Johnson isn't typically the type of player to get caught up in hype. Offensive linemen focus on protection, communication, and physical battles at the line of scrimmage. Flashy highlight throws usually happen far behind them. But even he acknowledged the play. Reports suggest Johnson appreciated the confidence behind the throw and the composure Sanders showed while delivering it. For linemen, those qualities matter more than highlight reels. A quarterback who stands tall in the pocket and trusts his protection can make an offensive line look far better than it actually is. That's part of what made the moment interesting. Because while one throw doesn't define a career, it can hint at something bigger. It shows arm strength, it shows timing, and maybe most importantly, it shows a quarterback who isn't afraid to take chances when the moment calls for it. Of course, it's important to keep the excitement in perspective. A single highlight play doesn't mean Sanders is about to take over the offense. The Browns still have experienced veterans, coaching decisions to make, and an entire season ahead before any long-term conclusions are drawn. But moments like this do have an impact. They create curiosity, they shift conversations, and they remind everyone watching that football is often about potential just as much as proven results. And as more eyes begin to focus on Cleveland's quarterback room, small flashes like this can quickly turn into major talking points. Because in the NFL, sometimes the biggest storylines start with just one throw. If there's one lesson the Cleveland Browns have learned over the past few seasons, it's that talent alone isn't enough. In the NFL, durability and stability often matter just as much as raw ability. And for Cleveland, that lesson has been painfully clear. Injuries have repeatedly disrupted the team's rhythm, especially at the quarterback position. When a franchise builds its offense around one player, any setback can quickly derail the entire game plan. That's exactly what happened with Deshaun Watson, whose availability has been one of the most heavily discussed topics surrounding the Browns. When Watson has been healthy and comfortable in the system, the offense has shown flashes of real potential. His mobility, arm strength, and experience can open up opportunities across the field. But the problem hasn't always been talent, it's been consistency and time on the field. Every missed game forces the coaching staff to adjust. Backup quarterbacks must step in. The offensive line has to quickly adapt to a different playing style. Receivers must build new timing with whoever is under center. That constant change can prevent an offense from ever fully finding its rhythm. That's why durability has quietly become one of the most important factors in Cleveland's long-term plans. It's also one of the reasons why conversations around younger quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders have gained attention among fans and analysts. Younger players are often viewed as potential long-term solutions, capable of growing with the team over multiple seasons. Of course, at this stage, much of that discussion remains speculative. Some fans believe Sanders could eventually become part of the Browns' future if the opportunity ever presented itself. Others argue the franchise is still fully committed to Watson and simply focusing on building the best roster around him. But regardless of which direction Cleveland ultimately chooses, one thing is clear. The offensive line must remain stable. That's where players like Zion Johnson become incredibly important. Offensive linemen may not always receive the headlines, but they form the foundation of every successful offense. A strong line protects the quarterback, creates running lanes, and allows the entire playbook to open up. Without that stability, even the most talented quarterbacks can struggle. For Cleveland, improving durability across the roster means building depth, strengthening the trenches, and ensuring that when injuries do happen, as they inevitably do in football, the team can continue operating at a high level. Because in today's NFL, the teams that succeed over the long term are rarely the ones with just the flashiest stars. They're the ones built to withstand chaos. And for the Browns, building that kind of stability may be the key to finally turning potential into sustained success. The Cleveland Browns are entering one of the most critical phases in their recent history. With major investments in the roster, a rebuilt offensive line, and constant debate around Deshaun Watson, the pressure to deliver results is growing fast. At the same time, rising curiosity around younger talents like Shedeur Sanders shows that fans are already thinking about the franchise's long-term future. Cleveland's strategy is clear: build strength in the trenches, stabilize the offense, and give their quarterbacks every possible chance to succeed. But the NFL rarely follows a simple script. If the rebuild works, the Browns could finally become a consistent contender. If it doesn't, the organization may face even bigger questions about its direction. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes Cleveland one of the most fascinating teams to watch this season.